Hello again, my friend. It's Todd Cetnar, your mental performance coach, and welcome back to the Three Pillars of Elite Results podcast here on Wisdom Wednesday. And today I welcome in a very special guest, and her name is Jennifer Bergeron. If you are a wife and a working mother looking to live the life that you want by being happy and healthy, then this podcast is for you. Jen will take us on a journey to where she was a bit of a wild child back in the day, as she explains, to settling in as a mom of two and a loving wife. She talks about balancing her career and also being a wife and mother while competing in one of the most grueling races in the world, the Ironman Triathlon. Jennifer will tell you the people she loved to meet, who inspired her, and how growing up with two older brothers taught her to be brave, to compete, and to never back down. Let's go. Jennifer, welcome to the Three Pillars of Elite Results podcast. And what's crazy about today is, although her initials stayed the same, her last name has changed, and I haven't seen your face, I think, since the mid-90s. Am I right with that?
I think that's probably right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, unbelievable. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. To give my listeners a little background on Jen and I's relationship, you know, we grew up from the same small town in Amsterdam, New York. I played basketball with both of her brothers, Jamie and John. One is about 6 feet, 5 inches. The other one's 6'3". And I think where I want to start, Jen, is I remember reading something where you wrote, you know, although, you know, the youngest and the girl growing up with two older brothers, very big, very tall, both athletes, your dad and your parents taught you that no matter how big they are, pound for pound, you're still the strongest, most competitive person in the family. Like, talk to me about how that came about.
So you're right about all those things. So my dad growing up both of my parents were super supportive of us, but my dad, I think because I was so much smaller than my brothers, at the time I believed it then and I believe it now, but he was building me up and building my confidence up to know that even though they were bigger and stronger than I was, that I still could hold my own.
Yeah.
And so it that sentiment rang true through our entire childhood, which is really kind of funny because now my dad says it to my daughter. And so we're kind of passing it on, which is nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's take a step back for our listeners, because one of the reasons why I invited you on the show, people that follow me know that my framework is predicated on mindset, leadership, and then building the right culture or environment around you to give you the best chance to win. And I always try to bring in people that I believe are doing some special things in life, not only for themselves, but are also giving back and serving others through the things that they do, through their actions. And I believe you're one of them. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But give our listeners a 50,000 foot view of who you are. Obviously, we talked about being from Amsterdam, but where you've been since the 90s, what you do both in the triathlon world and also in your professional life.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing because if you look back at where I was in the 90s, it was like a complete 180 from where I am right now. I mean, it's just I'm not the same person. And of course, we all grow and change, but like, I had short hair. I was rebellious. If you told me not to do it, I was doing it. So like, I was going to get into trouble if I could. And so here I am though now in my 40s, and all I can do is follow the rules. And so like, I can't even sleep at night if I don't follow the rules, which is funny. So yeah, I grew up in Amsterdam, and then my parents moved to Slingerlands when I was in high school. So you graduated the year that I was a freshman, and they moved. So completed my freshman year at Amsterdam. My parents moved to Slingerlands. I was already going to Bishop McGinn High School in Albany for 10th and 11th grade. Then they finally moved my senior year. So they've been in Slingerlands ever since. And when I graduated high school, I moved to New York City. I went to Marymount Manhattan College, and I studied dance. From there, so I lived in New York for 6 years. Then I met my husband. We weren't married at the time. We moved out to California. We lived in LA for 2 years. Nice. And then in 2006, we moved back to Albany. Okay. So we've been back here for quite some time now, which is what opened the doors to a lot of things for me, because I don't know that I would have had the same opportunities in LA that I have here.
Correct.
So Yeah.
So when you made your way back here, talk to me about what you're doing now professionally. I think you're still working with your mom or joined up with your mom and doing real estate, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were in California, my husband was doing business to business sales, and she really wanted him to come back here to work for her in real estate.
Okay.
So she recruited Patrick to come back to the area. And at the time, I was like, well, I didn't really have a job lined up. So I thought, well, I'll just get my real estate license too and see where it goes. And we kind of had some like ebbs and flows. Patrick left the business for a little while, and then we got engaged, and then he got back in the business. So like it's changed a little bit, but I've been working with my mom since 2006. So yeah, it's pretty nice to be able to work with your mom every day. Most
Absolutely.
people don't say the same thing, but I
Listen, I can attest being obviously growing up a coach's son, getting playing for my dad. He was my teacher. Of course, I went home to the same household with him, so that was cool. And you get mentored, and of course, you got a leader right in front of you all these years.
right.
The company you work for is Albany Realtor Group, right? For our
Only
listeners.
Realty Group. Yep. Yeah, we're right in Delmar, and yeah, we've been in business for over 20 years now, which is pretty spectacular too, given the ebbs and flows of the real estate market.
Absolutely. All right. So if anyone's looking to buy or sell a home, Albany Realtor Group, Jen Bergeron is
Right.
the person to
That's
reach out
right.
to. Little
Right.
shout out. So let's go back to how you were growing up, talking about your brothers. Again, I haven't seen Jamie or John in a long time, but how did they kind of set you up? You got these two guys, obviously boys do what boys do, right? How did that set you up longer term for being the person you are today, right? And we're going to talk about you accomplishing Ironman triathlons and things like that, but I'm sure that toughness resonated really early on.
Yeah, I think it was the mental toughness, honestly, which I didn't realize at the time I was getting. But my brothers, because they're so much bigger than I am, I mean, I'm 5'4", and you're right, Jamie's like 6'5", 6'6", so
Yeah.
he's gigantic. And they were so much bigger than me, we couldn't get physical. Like my mom didn't intervene a lot, but she did when we would get physical, because it's just not a fair matchup, no matter how you look at it. So it was a lot of mental stuff. My brothers had a lot to say, and so Jamie and I are exactly 3 years apart. We have the same birthday.
That's right.
And then John and I are only 18 months apart or 16 months apart. So like we're all really close in age too, which I think adds a layer of challenge, because we're all sort of in similar things at the same time and similar groups of friends. And I always wanted to be around my brothers, but they didn't want to be around me. So yeah, so it was more of a mentally challenging experience growing up with my brothers more than physical, because it
Gotcha.
just like wouldn't have been fair.
Yeah, we're going to get into the mental stuff. And for those of you that know who you are, I've got a lot of local listeners that follow. Just tell us, where is Jamie and John these days, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so Jamie lives in Boston with his wife Val,
Okay.
and John is living up in Clifton Park, so he's
Okay.
not too far from me now.
Awesome. So we're all kind
Yeah,
of local with me being in
yeah,
Saratoga. Very
yep,
good.
yep.
So let me just change gears for a minute and talk about this is like a two-part question. What was your source of inspiration? And maybe it's going back to your family, maybe not. And I know the impact your parents and brothers have had on you, but what was your source of inspiration growing up? And also, it might have changed, right? What is your source of information or inspiration now in terms of people or a person you look up to that really motivates you every day to continue to grow and be better than you were yesterday and then better tomorrow than you are today?
Yeah. So growing up, I mean, I was a dancer growing up, and like I said, I was a little bit of a rebellious kid. So
Yeah.
it's not like I was on like this straight and narrow path that was like, easy to follow. And I'm not saying kids have an easy path to follow, but it was just tough, I think. And so my goal growing up, I'll never forget it, because it felt kind of silly then saying it, but my goal growing up was just to be happy. I just wanted to do whatever it was that made me happy. And that has continued to like ring true through my adult life now. It's like, and of course we all want to be happy, but like really intentionally doing the things that make you happy and surrounding yourself with people who make you happy. And so I don't know that I necessarily had like an inspiration growing up. But now I can tell you my inspiration are the people who are outside grinding away every single day. I follow a ton of, professional triathletes and professional runners, and they're all great. And that's all very inspiring, but it's not reality for a lot of us. A lot of us have full-time jobs. We have kids. We have so many other things that we're trying to manage, and then still try to squeeze in this insane training load.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. So when I'm driving down the street and I see not your typical runner body, right? This person who's out there and they might look like they're struggling a little bit. Those people are the ones that make me the happiest, because they have found a way to get out the door and to get moving. Yeah. And that's really the biggest inspiration, I think, because it's not easy to do.
No. Yeah, that's a great answer. And you and I were talking offline before we got going. And for those of you that followed last week's podcast with Amanda Kenny, we talked a little bit about her relationship with Chris Nikic, who's the first person with Down syndrome to not only complete an Ironman Triathlon, but also the Boston Marathon last year. And so those are one of those people that, if he can get up every day and go through something as grueling as he did and do it with a smile on his face, it's right. Impressive, right? And so those are the people that inspire us every day. And I couldn't agree with you more. As we talk about runners outside, let's talk a little bit about triathlon, because I'm curious to know, you and I, as I mentioned, lost touch for many years, but when I found you on Instagram, I saw all these races and all these medals. So talk to me about where this started for you. I don't recall you doing this in high school, although I know we went to different high schools, but same hometown. But where did this triathlon thing start?
So I started off as a runner, and not even like I'll say a serious runner, right? Like I was a seasonal runner. One of my girlfriends, I was teaching yoga at the time, and she came to my yoga class, and she was a runner, and she was like, we should go for a run sometime. I'm like, no, not a runner, not doing it. And, week after week, she would continue to kind of ask me to go for a run with her until eventually I did. And we ran that season. So probably like summertime, fall time. And then when it got cold, we stopped running. And this was before kids. So my son now is 11. So this was, 11 plus years ago. And, I wound up getting diagnosed with Lyme disease. And that was really like the pivotal moment for me, because I thought I was dying. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And I couldn't move. So that was really hard for me. And when I finally started to feel better, I went for a run outside, and I could only go 3/4 of a mile. I couldn't even make it a whole mile. But I was like, you know what? It's starting somewhere. I didn't care how short it was or how slow it was. And it was then that I realized that I needed to put myself not first, because the kids have to come first, but like a really close second. And that was probably, I think Mason was 3 or 4 at the time. So, 6 years ago. So I started running, and then I met another group of friends through my son's preschool, and a friend of mine who was part of the Bethlehem Triathlon Club. I started, all you have to do is mention to a triathlete that you're thinking about getting into triathlon. And next thing you know, you've got the gear, you've got the training partners, you've got a schedule. I mean, they just want to help you get started. So this friend of mine's like 5'9", and like I mentioned, I'm 5'4". She let me borrow her bike for the season, like one of her road bikes. Wow. So I rode her bike for the season. I did Crystal Lake Triathlon, which was a sprint distance.
And what year was this?
2015.
Okay.
And so Mason was 5, Renzi was 4, and I did that first race. And to be honest, I don't love the sprint distance. It's not so it's a miracle that I came back to triathlon, because I didn't love that experience, but I loved the challenge. And that's where I was like, I'm so stubborn that I refused to let it sort of be a challenge to me. I was like, no, I'm going to try to overcome this challenge, and I'm going to try to make it easier. So anyway, I borrowed the bike for that season. And then after that, I got a new to me, it was used road bike, which I still have. And then I used that for a couple of years, and then eventually added on a triathlon bike. But it started off in 2015 with just a little sprint distance triathlon. And And to be honest, I had to backstroke half of that swim because I was not a comfortable, confident swimmer. So that's like a whole nother.
Well, a lot of times I talk about, and it's interesting you said that, after having diagnosed with Lyme disease and then ultimately couldn't run 3/4 of a mile. I talk to my clients and the people that follow me often about understanding that it's the start that stops most people. And,
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you want to do something big, you have a goal in front of you, or even if it's an obstacle, a lot of people are afraid to get going because they don't know where to start. And then they try it and it's so difficult. And they're saying to themselves, if I can't run a mile, how can I run 26.2? How can I do an Ironman? And, as you know, I'm going through I'm doing 3 this year, 2 70s and 1 full. I'm not even thinking about finishing a race. All I'm worried about is today's workout.
Yeah, right.
And
Right.
following the process and not worrying about the outcome. And you're the epitome of that, even after being diagnosed with something that was debilitating for a while and finding your way back and landing on your feet, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. People don't know where to start, and I think I'm guilty of it too. After I finish this season, I'll take some time off, and jump starting it again is always hard to do.
Yeah.
It's still hard to do because you just don't feel the same. You took some time off, which your body needs. You need to recover, you need to rest, you need to put on a couple pounds. Like, you can't live this lifestyle 365 days a year. It's just not healthy. You need to have a little bit of a break. But even for those of us who've been in it for a long time, still struggle to get jump started again. So you've got to find ways to trick your mind into getting out there.
Well, it's a great segue because we're getting into mindset, and certainly you found a lifestyle in what you do, because I think you just signed up for another Bethlehem Triathlon, or you just did it,
So I just did the Tour of the Battenkill, which is a 75-mile bike ride up in Washington County, and I'll tell you what, it is the hardest bike ride I've ever done to date. Wow. So if you want a challenging bike ride, I suggest the Battenkill.
Well, let me get through an Ironman before I go that far. It's definitely a lifestyle. You've been doing it for over 6-7 years now. And, for most people that don't know this, but if you do a full Ironman triathlon, it's anywhere between 13 to 17 hours. I think the cutoff might be around 17 hours. Again, it's a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, then ultimately a marathon at the end. The one thing I noticed about you, though, when I look at your Instagram photos, when you started to talk about triathlons just right here on the call, you're always smiling. And I said this in the last episode as well. And I don't know if this is something that just gets taught with the people around you that are also doing triathlons, but how do you manage to keep that smile on your face? What is it about what you're doing? Is that a strategy, or is that just your mentality to get yourself through it and be smiling while you're going through such grueling training and a grueling race?
Sometimes it's just if I'm smiling, it's going to sort of resonate in the rest of my body. If I start crying, the rest of my body is going to resonate that too, and I have some pretty gnarly race pictures out there with you that I will be happy to share with you sometime that they are not going to make it onto social media, but I try really hard. My coach, Fran Vincent, says, smile till your face hurts. Because if I am smiling on my face, it's going to be in the rest of my body. And then suddenly your mindset changes. And, the day doesn't seem as terrible. But you will have those moments where you want to cry, or maybe you do cry, and that's okay too. But, at the end of the day, I remind myself how grateful and lucky I am to be here doing this, because this is not something that's easy for a lot of people to do. And it's not easy for me either, but it's a huge time commitment. It takes a toll on your family. It takes a toll on your friends. So it's not easy, but I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to do this, because it makes me happy. I'm healthy, I sleep better, everything else falls into place. So how can you not smile about that?
I agree with you. And, you gave me one of the best advices before I completed my first marathon back in February. And I don't know if you realize this, but you said, when you go out there, you want light feet, right? You want eyes up and a happy heart. And I listened to that throughout the entire race, because it's so important to know, first of all, God's given you the ability to have a body that can do this. right? And then ultimately, mentally you're strong enough to be able to face adversity and complete something that's important to you because you're testing your limits, right? And that kind of leads me to the next question, Jen, which is, if you think about my first pillar, which is mindset, okay? It's my first pillar because I believe the 6 inches between your ears dictate the 6 feet below, in your case, 5'4". What is it when you get hit with adversity, whether you're in an Ironman or you're struggling in your day, you're just in a difficult mood for whatever the external circumstances are, like where do you go when adversity hits you? How do you get out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like what you said earlier about being process oriented. So like when you're in a race and suddenly your legs are starting to cramp up, instead of thinking about how am I going to get to the end of the race, how am I going to get to like the next aid station, or how am I going to get to the next mile? So you just have to be super process oriented. And that's easier for me to do in a race situation than it is to do in my day-to-day life, because we just don't practice it as much. Whereas in a race, in your training, you have to practice those things. So I think being process oriented and trying to carry that over into the day to day is what helps you to get over some of those hurdles, because things are going to get thrown at you. But the other thing too to remember is that at the end of the day, all these things, they're not a big deal. It's not, so what if you have to walk a little bit? Or so what if you have to get off your bike for a minute? Like, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't make you any less of a person because you had to slow down or stop.
Right.
And so reminding yourself that the little things really are the little things, even though in the moment they seem like big things.
Yep.
And the big things, keep them and let them be big things, but make sure to have like a very clear understanding of what those two things are. And I think a lot of people struggle with that sort of like being able to put them into different categories, I guess.
I couldn't agree more. In whatever it is in life that you're tackling, and this is for our listeners as well, it doesn't need to be a triathlon race. If you're looking to get your MBA and you're like, wow, it's 3-5 year commitment, I don't know what school, I don't know what I want to study. All you need to do is take one step, right? And the first step is, what are you interested in?
Yeah.
Figure out what you're interested in. That's step one. When you figure that out, what school has that? That's step two. In an MBA example, and that goes for anything. Last night was a great example for me. My daughter got up 5 times overall. And so I'm on one daughter duty. My wife's on the other daughter duty. And when she got up for the 3rd time, I started to think in the middle of the night, like, how many more times? What about tomorrow? I've got so much to do. And I started to unravel a little bit. And I got myself back into the strategy of, let's just worry about the next time she wakes up.
Yeah.
If I can handle that, we'll be okay. It's just, I call it 200 feet at a time until you get yourself out of it, because everything will pass. So that's great advice, Jen.
Yeah.
As we transition to another question, I want you to think about this. What is the one word, if you wanted someone to explain who Jen Bergeron is, what would that one word be and why?
What would I want it to be? Or that's a good question. I don't think I prepared for that one. I prepared for all the other ones.
That's okay.
So what's one question they would use to describe me, basically?
Yeah.
I think happy, really. I think people would describe me as being a happy person, and not just like on the facade, like truly deep down inside, I'm just a happy person. And I try really hard to continue that even on the days when it's not easy to do, so yeah.
No, that's fair. That's awesome. And if you had the opportunity to sit across the table from, let's say, 1, 2, 3 people, as many or as little as you want, dead or alive, tell me who you would choose and tell me why you'd choose them.
Yeah. So I think the first person I would choose is the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
You want to talk about going through adversity? I mean, that man's life has been filled with adversity, and having to overcome so many, so much in his life.
Yeah.
And look at that man with that smile on his face. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't see him. And again, I'm sure he has his moments. We're all human, but you just don't. He can still go through the things that he has gone through in his life and preach the teachings that are so important to him.
Yeah.
Even when the people who he's teaching them to don't necessarily deserve them, so I think he would be a remarkable person to sit down and talk to. And
it's a good one.
Yeah. And then the other person I was thinking about this question is Tina Fey, and not for any other reason than I think she's absolutely hilarious. I think she's so talented, and I'm sure she's had her fair share of adversity too, in a world that's male dominated for a lot of years. To make it to the level that she has, I think is pretty awesome. And she's a mom, and she's just, she's living it. So I think she would be fun to chit chat with.
Absolutely. Listen, anyone who's successful like her has gone through a lot of challenges and a lot of adversity. Every successful person has. And so certainly I bet you her story would be an incredible one to hear.
Yeah.
As we wind down a little bit, I'm going to throw some hot seat questions at you. I didn't give you these to prepare, so I'm going to put you on the spot. But I do have one more question for you. And if we go back and rewind to your childhood, your teenage years, and you mentioned a word, you were a little rebellious, rules didn't mean much to you. But if you could give that Jen advice of what you know now, what would you tell her?
I think the younger version of me had a lot of anxiety that I didn't really know was anxiety. So I think I would tell that version of me just not to worry. There's nothing to worry about. Just like we said, go through each day. Don't try to predict what's going to happen. Don't try to prevent what's going to happen. Just roll with it a little bit, because I think I got in my own way quite a bit growing up, and even into my early, adult years. I made life harder than it needed to be. And so I think if I could rewind, I would tell that one, just, take a breath. Don't worry about it. It's all going to work out.
Yeah, it's great advice, especially coming through a global pandemic the last couple of years. And I know it's been stressful and lives lost, but it's like, as we come out of this, I think anxiety is higher than it's ever been. And so it's important to take a step back and understand that, I like what you said earlier, some of the things you feel are big in the moment aren't as big as you think, number one. And then number two, a lot of anxiety is up here, but it's never actually reality. There's more going on up here than out there, and it's important to understand and be aware of, for sure.
Yeah. I also think that triathlon and running, any endurance sport, is gonna, take care of a lot of that anxiety. When you are so mentally and physically exhausted at the end of the day, and it's not just from triathlon, it's kids and life and work and all this stuff. I mean, you don't have the mental capacity to sort of keep that energy, buzzing in your head. So
Agreed.
I think endurance sports helps that a lot.
Agreed. Before we get to the hot seat questions and we wind down, can you just tell the listeners, how many triathlons have you done? I know there's a few full Ironmans. Just walk us through the amount of medals sitting in your room somewhere.
I have a wall of them. It's not here, but it's motivation when I'm in my basement on the bike. I've done 9 half irons.
Okay.
And I did my first full last year, but it wasn't an Ironman branded race. So my race was actually 144.6 because the bike was 4 extra miles.
Okay.
And that was out in Penn Yan, New York. And that was just because of COVID. I was supposed to do the full in Mont Tremblant, and then the border closed and all this kind of stuff. So that was my first full. And then I've only done maybe a handful of sprints. I did 1 Olympic distance. So I think that's it for triathlons right now. Okay. I have an Olympic coming up next month down in Cape May, New Jersey, and then I have a half iron in July out in Geneva. So I'll be at my 10th half iron. I love that distance. It's my
nice.
favorite.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about mine next month. It's Coeur d'Alene in Idaho.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing the Arizona half in October, and that'll set me up for the Arizona full in November. So big year for me, first year of doing any of them. Yeah. If you were to choose, for those people that are also doing some Ironman events, you're about to do 10 of them by the end of this year. What was your favorite so far?
My favorite, so the one out in Geneva, it used to be Muscle Man, and then Ironman bought it 2 years ago. So now it's Ironman Muscle Man maybe, or Ironman Geneva, I don't know. But anyway, that race was locally owned for the first few years that I did it. And I really loved that one. I think my coach does it every year. And so I think it's not just the race and the venue, but it's also the people that tend to be at your races that make it special. So that one has sort of been a consistent race for me that's been really good. And I think Ironman did a really good job keeping it sort of quaint and doing some of the things that the town did before they took it over. So I like Geneva. It's a beautiful part of the area for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And fairly local to us, which is great.
Yeah.
All right. You ready?
Ready. Not good at these, but go ahead.
All right. So all you have to do is off the top of your head, whatever comes to your heart, your head first. I just want you to spit it out. And then if I ask you to explain why, we'll dive into that. All right, here we go. Hot seat question for Jen Bergeron. First one is, last meal, you can pick anything you want. What would you choose?
Oh, God. If I could choose it. Sushi.
Sushi. Favorite smell of all time?
Lilacs.
Favorite movie?
Oh, Christmas Vacation.
That's a good one. Favorite app on your phone right now?
Waze.
That's a good one too. Why do your kids call your dad Birdie?
Because he makes a lot of birdie putts.
Is that true or is that fake? I saw it written.
No, it's true.
Albany Country Club, a lot of birdie putts. What is the background on your phone right now?
Peaches.
Very
not
nice.
that one.
No.
I thought you meant my case.
No.
Oh, the background on my phone? It's my family.
Perfect. Family. Okay. What is your favorite quote? I don't know if you have one, but if you do, you can share it.
Variety is the spice of life.
Good one. Okay. What is the one song? Anytime it comes on, it just gets you in that mood to get fired up and turn it up.
There's so many. The Tina Turner song. What's the one that they played at Schitt's Creek? I'm forgetting it now.
Tina Turner. Hit me with your best shot. Tina Turner.
They sang it in Schitt's Creek. I can't remember.
I don't know if I've seen it all, but Tina Turner, somebody will know that song. All right, here's what we're going to do. I just want to know if you could give our listeners and viewers any parting words that you'd like to leave them with today from you, Jen. What would that be?
I think it's just encouraging people to find a challenge. Don't be scared of the challenge, and to do whatever you need to do to get started to overcome that challenge, whatever it is. Because I talk to a lot of people, and triathlon is my challenge, right? It's what I love to do. But there's so many other things, like you said, your MBA or whatever it is that you are not doing because you're afraid of doing it. Just do the first thing today to get started, to open that door.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more. Great parting words from Jen Bergeron today. I tell people, and I'll say it again, don't let the start stop you. Make 2022 the best year of your life. Challenge yourself. Do something bigger than you. Join a club. It doesn't have to be a triathlon, but do something to get yourself healthy. Feel good about what you're doing, and every time your feet hit the floor, you're ready to go and fired up for the life that you're living. So, Jen, thank you so much for the time today, and good luck the rest of the year with all of your races.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks. Today is up to you. Take inspired action and don't count the days, make the days count.